Northern Ireland and Scotland. He was given too much task, so we didn't do much. But this year, last year, we have re-established APPG on Third World Solidarity. We have the chairman who is replaced actually in Residing constituency, David Wilson, and then our long-standing vice chairman, and I think the human rights activist and a leader. Now we have 4 speakers, and we are very pleased that the list can stay a bit longer, but Lord Ahmed has to leave. First will be our founder member, a journalist who has also traveled last 5 weeks to USA, and that she was on the press trip. During this journey, somewhere she has lost her voice, but I hope she is strong enough to shout, and microphone is in front of her. So can I say, first of all, our founder member and a journalist and human rights activist who lived in Ethiopia when she was quite young, long time ago. So can I ask Saundra actually to speak first on the crisis of Yemen? I think we are hoping that this very difficult and a war which war never brings the fruit or any results. It will end soon, and the people of Yemen, 24 million, and half of them are starving or at the verge of starving. Thousands have died, millions have been displaced, and this is, I think, the first meeting on Yemen in House of Parliament under APPG on Third World Solidarity, and I'm very thankful to Police Twist and Lord Ahmed, and we will be expecting a few other MPs as well here. So Saundra, actually, the floor is for you. Thank you.
Thank you. A bit of a background paper that is not comprehensive. The Yemen is one of the Middle East's poorest countries, and with millions on the verge of starvation, a flourishing cholera epidemic, and countless dead, today's war is described by the United Nations as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Yet the Yemen crisis has been largely ignored by the West. That is, until early last October with the murder of Saudi dissident Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul by his own government, and at the behest, it appears, of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This event has received massive international media attention and served to turn the spotlight on Saudi Arabia's actions elsewhere. Enter the Saudi-led coalition's precision bombing that has struck everything from factories and water wells to weddings and funerals. Under the leadership of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi-led coalition and its Yemeni allies have also imposed a raft of punitive economic measures on the country. The roots of today's Yemeni conflict date back to 2011 with the Arab Spring, at which time a Yemen uprising forced the authoritarian president Ali Abdullah Saleh to resign, handing over power to his deputy Abdrabu Mansur Hadi. The hope that Hadi would bring stability to the region was short-lived. The new regime was fraught with problems that included corruption, militant attacks, and food insecurity, amongst all other factors. In 2014, fighting broke out when the Houthi Shia Muslim rebel movement, said to be backed by Iran, took advantage of the new president's weakness and seized control of the northern Sada province and neighboring areas. The Houthis went on to take the capital, Sana'a, forcing Hadi into exile. A dramatic escalation took place in March 2015 when Saudi Arabia and 8 other, mostly Sunni, Arab states backed by the US, the UK, and France began airstrikes against the Houthis. The coalition feared that any continuing successes by the Houthis would give Shia-dominated Iran a foothold in the Yemen. Meanwhile, the Saudi-led coalition's declared aim was to restore Hadi's government. Martha Mundi, who is traveling, hence unable to accept our invitation to speak, has written a concise and damning report titled Strategies of the Coalition in the Yemen War. published by the World Peace Foundation. It looks in detail at aerial bombardment and patterns of targeting civilian, agricultural, and fishing sites. According to Mundi, if one places the damage to the resources of food producers, that is farmers, herders, and fishers, alongside targeting of food processing, storage and transport in urban areas, and the wider economic war, there is strong evidence that coalition strategy has aimed to destroy food production and distribution in the areas under the control of Saundra. From the autumn of 2016, economic war has compounded physical destruction to create a massive failure in basic livelihoods. And a key point in closing this quote from our report: deliberate destruction of family farming and artisanal fishing is a war crime, and that is documented. I have the resolution numbers, but I won't bother to cite them. The director of the World Peace Foundation, Alex Duval, says Yemen poses a particularly acute challenge to the United States and the United Kingdom, who are both key allies of Saudi Arabia. From the beginning of the Saudi intervention back in 2015, the USA has provided mid-air refueling for Saudi-led coalition aircraft that then flew missions related to the Yemen campaign. And it's worth mentioning President Trump, who repeatedly complains that the United States is paying too much for the defense of its allies, has praised Saudi Arabia for ostensibly taking on Iran in the Yemen war. To return to Khashoggi, this one death has drawn the world's attention to the cozy relationship between the United States and the Saudi monarchy. Early last November, the month of Khashoggi's death, Trump put out the following statement: after my heavily negotiated trip to Saudi Arabia last year, the kingdom agreed to spend and invest $450 billion in the United States. Of the $450 billion, $110 billion will be spent on the purchase of military equipment from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and many other great, that he emphasizes, U.S. defense contractors. That's the end of the quote. And I just throw in that Raytheon have been shown to be the people that shrapnel has been picked up from the many bombs that they've dropped. They are in Texas and Arizona and so forth. But these are companies being praised, of course, by Trump. American jobs are the Trump administration's stated reason for selling weapons. And in closing, it took Khashoggi's murder to push Washington and the world into a call for a ceasefire in Yemen. Some further points that I will not elaborate upon, but I will mention, are that Egypt and Sudan are supporting the coalition, and there's a recruitment of many fighters now based in the Yemen that are former Janjaweed fighters who are known for their rape and pillage of people, women, children, etc. And also there is evidence that the UAE, which the coalition claims is confined to air forays, has established prisons on the ground, obviously, where torture is rife. Basically, in final summary, the Yemen presents a quagmire of sorts, with culpability on many sides, not least of which the finger can be strongly pointed at those who manufacture and supply weapons that kill and maim the innocent and vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In 1991, our friends from Iraq know that first Middle East war started in 1991, and it is still continuing. Yes, without any delay, can I request Lord Ahmed of Rotherham, who has done a lot of work in the Middle East, not in only in Yemen, but all part of the Middle East, Sudan, Ethiopia, and many other. And we know that now the Ethiopian Prime Minister, I was very pleased to see last night on our word, BBC twice repeated, last night and night before, that the present Prime Minister is bringing in the people, and I know Kefale Alemu, but he's bringing in the people. And if somebody, leader, is there to bring people in, they start coming in as soon as he asked them to. Lord
Mushtaq, thank you very much. Thank you to Third World Solidarity and Chair for organizing this meeting. Actually, I've come straight from the airport, so I haven't gone home yet, and I need to leave straight after. My apologies. The reason why I'm here, one is that my commitment to Third World Solidarity as the Vice Chairman, but also because for me Yemen is a very important subject. Last Monday, I had a short question for a debate in the House of Lords on Yemen, asking Her Majesty's government's view on what the situation was. And of course we know that the peace process in Sweden, which we were hoping that both the Houthi government and also the Shia-led government would both, they call them rebels, but at least Sana and the South would be able to come to a peaceful resolution overall. But sadly, that's not happened because there are many reasons. Personally, I believe that there's a proxy war. Both Iran and Saudi Arabia are playing that proxy war. Some can blame one more than the other, but the very fact that 84,000 children have been killed, 10,000 adults killed because of starvation, 10,000 people have been bombed to death, and 1 crore, 10 million people are just one step away from starvation. And 80% of the 24 million population is dependent on aid. So the fighting was continuing, and there's a lot of pressure on Britain and America because both countries and some other European countries have been supplying arms to Saudi Arabia and UAE, who are bombing. You can't bomb people into peace. We know from Iraq, we know from Afghanistan. If you think you're going to bomb them into peace, then you're obviously on the wrong planet. You have to do other things. Sadly, the people who've been suffering are civilians. So last week, when I raised this question in the House of Lords, a couple of days before, after the peace process actually, there was a drone attack on a military parade by the Houthi government's top military brass, where the head of intelligence services was killed, and so were many, 6 altogether. I think the top people were killed. Now I understand, even though I was in Pakistan, I was monitoring my Twitter. I understand that Saudis have been bombing Sana'a in the last couple of days, very heavily, and there's been a lot of loss of life. I also know that British diplomats were trying to table a resolution at the UN Security Council to persuade both parties to adhere to a permanent peace and settlement. And there's a planned peace conference, phase 2, in Jordan. I don't know whether that's taken because I've been away from here for a little while. But my real reason is actually is because poor people are dying, children, and whether it is the government or the opposition, whoever they are, the gist of this is that poor people, civilians, are being killed. I remember seeing a horrible pictures of a factory that was bombed, and the Saudis were claiming that they are manufacturing arms in this factory. Actually, it was a water bottling plant. And I saw this old couple who were completely devastated because their young sons had been killed in this factory, who were just workers, and they had been burnt to death because of the heavy bombs that were used there. And I remember the words of this mother who basically said that those who killed my children, I pray that God destroys them. And there's an Arabic translation of the Quran, Inna batsha rabbika lashadid. My Arab friends will understand. The grip of Allah is very, very severe and strong. And when there is injustice, then I believe that Mohammed bin Salman has been mentioned. That's whether it's Khashoggi's murder or whether it is his policy against the Qatar regime. It's a failed policy, and you know that's why the Arab world is completely divided. We, Third World Solidarity, should be calling for peace process, immediate stop to bombing, and also making Saudi Arabia and its allies that they should provide food and rebuild this country which they've destroyed, which they had nothing to do with. It was an internal struggle, a civil war that led to overthrow of the evil president's regime. Then Hadi took over. Hadi was thrown out. He came back in the south. Sadly, some Yemeni friends tell me that it may lead to the old bad days when Yemen was divided between south and north. I hope not, and I hope that there could be a peace process where everybody could be accommodated, because Yemen didn't actually have, I mean, some people may try and make it out that this is a Shia-Sunni war. It wasn't like that. And there isn't a real problem between the Shia and Sunnis in Yemen. Although there is a proxy war, there is power struggle between other people from outside. But the very fact that children are being starved to death, and there are some very poor, it's the poorest country of GCC and in this whole region. And even though it has oil, even though it has some resources, nevertheless, the best thing that Third World Solidarity and this meeting can call, and please publicize whatever resolution that you come to an end, is that we demand peace now. We demand that Saudi Arabia and its allies, including Britain and America, should stop bombing Yemen, and also ask Houthis to stop using drones and retaliating, because that's only leading to more bloodshed. So my apologies, and I have to go, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I know that, as I said, listen to the speakers first, so I'm going to invite Clive. Thank you very much, Lord. So another thank you for that. Clive.
Thank you, Mushtaq, and thank you very much for coming. Third World Solidarity. I knew nothing about this group, so I looked on the parliamentary website, and there are dozens of all parliamentary party groups. And that really encapsulates why the world is the way it is, because most of our debate is fragmented and siloed. So whether it be in schools, in academia, in politics, we have this siloing of information. And critical thinking, which is the research on which I'm basing my short talk, came together 7 years ago to try and break those boundaries and actually look beyond the established narratives and try and assimilate information from all sources and distill it down. And that's done through a process of what we've open sourced as a project called co-creative learning. And in essence, what that does is enables us to gather multiple perspectives on a given issue or event in order to understand and answer what I think are three essential questions. And this pertains to Yemen, as I'll come on to. One is who rules, how and why. And basically our work over the last 7 years has resulted in an analysis which suggests that we, globally, people, are farmed. And the mechanism by which we are farmed are three essential flaws. One is hierarchy, the idea that we defer to authority, that we submit to the authority of another human being, or that we expect others to submit to our authority. The second is, if you like, related to that, because authority has actually colonized the commons, land, resources, that rightfully belong to us all, denying us the means to life, unless we are treating with the very system that has denied us our means to life. And then the final nail in the coffin of our future, if you like, is usury, which most of you in this room will be very familiar with, as it's a fundamental tenet of Islam. Christianity abandoned it 500 years ago and have been running from the subject ever since. But interest on money effectively sucks wealth from the poorest to the richest, but I don't want to go into that here. So the context of Yemen is that the world is ruled by money power. And that has crystallized. The Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, controls central banking throughout most of the world, except for those countries that get attacked, like Iraq and others. And that money power is seeking to colonize and control resources, and they manipulate governments and corporations because our work suggests that they exercise direct power over governments and over corporations, and they're colonizing resources and manipulating geopolitics in their interests. And the reason that we find it so difficult to combat this is because, one, because we're siloed in the all-parliamentary party group for Third World Solidarity, instead of having a much broader and general conversation, and that the information we are fed is carefully filtered and manipulated in order to support their specific narrative. So they control the media and they control academia. So one may ask oneself, well, what is the objective? And the objective is one world government. And this is a trajectory that possibly goes back centuries, but it has actually evolved with great clarity since the start of the 20th century. With the Bolshevik revolution, which was funded by Wall Street. I would recommend a book by Anthony Sutton, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. World War I was to lay the foundations for the New World Order and destroy a national obstacle, i.e. Germany, and I recommend a book by Jim McGregor and Jerry Doherty called Hidden History. And then in this century we had 9/11, which effectively opened the Pandora's box for the war on terror and to extend this colonization of resources and peoples by proxy wars, as Lord Ahmed referred to. And those proxy wars we've seen obviously in Iraq, we've seen it in Libya and now in Syria, which may hopefully be coming to an end, and of course Yemen, which has gone on unnoticed under the radar since March 2015. And if you really want to understand the context for Yemen from a historical perspective, Yemen has been referred to as a poor country. It was never a poor country. It is rich in culture, it is rich in resources, it is rich in intellect. And that is what has been destroyed by this money power system. And we can sit here thinking this is a problem that doesn't affect us. But the problems that we've seen rolling out across the Middle East are now coming to Europe. And don't be seduced into the thought that it could never happen here. The authorities are killing French people on the streets of Paris. And those people are rising in similar fashion to the Arab Spring. And these are always manipulated, and we saw what happened in Egypt. But be in no doubt, we are next, as is the US. So what do we do about this? And in critical thinking, the only way that we could get a grasp of such a multiplicity and richness of narratives is by working collaboratively. So we have no teachers and no students, we work collaboratively, and we're working in a small group in London, interacting with thousands of people around the world. We're drawing on information, historic and contemporary, from many different sources to try and get as broad a picture of what's going on as possible. And basically, the world, the political economy, Yemen, Britain, wherever you like, they are all too big to be controlled and managed, but they can self-organize. And before imperial power, British, French, Italian, now American, Russian, Soviet, shall I say, China, before imperial power, Yemeni was much closer to a self-organizing society than it is today, and ethnic groups, religious groups lived in harmony. It was a center of culture, and that is also what is being destroyed in this war. If you want to destroy a people, destroy their culture. So the bottom line for everyone in this room is that until Yemenis and all other oppressed peoples are free, then none of us are free. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Clive. Obviously, people will look at your critical. Next speaker, who is from Amnesty International, and he is working on Yemen war, is it right? And we wanted another friend of us from Ethiopia as well to join us, but she lives in Held, and it was difficult for us in very cold weather. So thank you for coming, and floor is yours, Oscar Jens.
Yes, yeah. So first of all, thank you for the all-parliamentary group of Third World Solidarity for inviting me. So as mentioned, my name is Oscar Jens. I am Amnesty International UK's coordinator for Iran and the UAE. Our Saudi Arabia and Yemen coordinator, Paul Dawson, couldn't make it, so I'm subbing him. Just to say a very brief introduction, who are we, what is Amnesty International? For those of you who haven't heard of us, we're the world's largest human rights organization. So we were founded in 1961 with the mission of furthering and creating a world in which the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is followed through. And we boast around 3 to 7 million members around the world, people who take action with us on injustice around the world. And this brings us to Yemen. So Saundra here gave a relatively good background of Yemen. So let me just go straight into March 25th of 2015. So this is the day that Saudi Arabia began its campaign in Yemen against the Houthi and their allies. So this conflict started when, as mentioned before, the Houthi rebellion took over Sana'a and Hadi's government had to flee. And ultimately, Hadi fled to Saudi Arabia and pleaded with the Saudi government if they could please come and reinstate him and take control of it, take over the Houthi, the ground that the Houthis had captured. So this led to what became a massive aerial bombardment campaign. The Saudi Arabia is one of the world's largest military purchasers of military weaponry. However, they do not like to use their ground forces. So what they have done instead is they have created a consistent campaign created of bombing military or civilian targets. And this is one of the largest problems in the war. So because the Saudis rely almost exclusively on the air forces and to conduct this war, they target very specifically not only military structures but civilian structures. So in a report conducted in 2016 by Human Rights Watch, a conclusion was made that actually 2/3 or 60% of all the military strikes that the Saudi Air Force made are in fact not military at all, but they are in fact targeting civilian locations. This includes places like hospitals, places like schools, markets, as mentioned before, factories as well. And this amounts itself to a war crime under Article 52 of the Geneva Convention, that targeting civilian infrastructure in any way constitutes a war crime. And the Saudis also target very specifically vehicles containing humanitarian assistance. So because Yemen, as you've heard before, is suffering from one of the probably the world's largest humanitarian catastrophe at the moment, where 60% of the population is in acute need of food or they are run the risk of starving to death. The Saudi and the Emirati coalition has targeted actual vehicles containing humanitarian aid. So this has been a pattern that's been happening for more or less the past 4 years now. So this report came out in 2016, and according to our current information, this is still the case, that civilian targets are being bombed on a very regular basis. Now, on the other side, the second large party in this coalition is the United Arab Emirates. So the United Arab Emirates is actually the world's second largest importer of weaponry after Saudi Arabia, and the UAE is my expertise. So the UAE have very specifically taken over southern Aden. Southern Yemen, the region known as Aden, which used to be its own country separate from northern Yemen. So the UAE says that they only provide aerial support to the campaign, but the matter of fact is they essentially run and bankroll a series of militias in southern Yemen, including former and current members of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And Amnesty International this June uncovered a series of hidden prisons where these militias, the various militias, under the guidance of Emirati intelligence, take away opposition members, members of civil society, people who demand accountability from these militias. Amnesty interviewed 51 individuals who reported, amongst other things, torture through electric shock, sexual violence, physical beatings, starvation, and also reported deaths in custody in these hospitals, or in these secret prisons. And what makes this problem particularly pernicious is the fact that because there are so many different militias, it's very hard to find out where people are hidden. So it is a very kind of reign of terror in the south of Yemen. And then, as I mentioned before, the Houthis in turn are fighting a very desperate war. They do not have air power, so they rely on technology such as drones. And the Houthi forces have indiscriminately shelled civilian populated areas, especially in Sana'a when they were taking over Sana'a, and in Taiz, which is Yemen's third largest city. And they've also laid anti-vehicle mines indiscriminately and used banned anti-personnel mines, which are designed not to kill someone but to maim them, so you will lose your leg or an arm. And in addition to this, it must be said, they've also recruited children to fight in their war. Now, as was mentioned earlier, also the Saudis are guilty of this. Because the Saudis do not like to send their own soldiers, Saudi soldiers, to fight and die, they've instead recruited from Sudan the former members of the Janjaweed militia. So these are Arab militiamen from the south of Sudan, close to the regions where non-Arab people of Sudan live. And because this area is extremely poor, even poorer than Yemen before the war, the basis that is against the UK law. So we're working on this at the moment. We're trying to get popular support through writing petitions, organizing protests, working with organizations such as Christian Aid or Action Group and Crisis Group, and really trying to convince MPs and parliamentarians that the United Kingdom does not need this blood on its hands, and we can survive on exports without this. Now, how big is all this? Well, to give you some figures, so the United Kingdom actually has increased its arms sale to Saudi Arabia by 2/3, by 450 million in the past 2 years. So even though there is this lip service to the fact that we are trying to follow international humanitarian law, we're trying to following our own laws, well, not only is the British government not following its own laws, it is also increasing its weapons sales to a country that is very clearly engaging in war crimes. Now, the reason that the British government has not yielded in yet is because this has gone to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals, half of the evidence that was presented was secret from British military personnel, which the Campaign Against Arms Trade did not have access to. So the evidence that shows that the Saudis are actually not intentionally bombing, or that this might not be a war crime, this is secret. So us as members of the public, as the peoples whose tax pounds and tax money is used to fund this crime against humanity, it's hidden from us. It's told to us that it's not important enough for us to know. So this is what we've been working on, and just like Saundra mentioned, Khashoggi's murder has really been a watershed moment. So finally people are paying attention to what the House of Assad is doing, all the flagrant violations of human rights that are taking place. and the sheer audacity with which they fund international law. And especially now that Britain exiting the European Union, Britain, or the possibility of that, the UK is entering a very precarious era where it's going to set and define its relationship with the rest of the world for the time being. And the United Kingdom alone cannot survive in a world which doesn't abide by international law, because that is a world in which the United Kingdom, hopefully not, but in a few decades, might not itself survive in a very pretty manner. So, thank you.
Inviting our next speaker, Ali Masfary, who is going to introduce us himself. I'm meeting him first time, but I'm very pleased that you are here.
Thank you. For the main problems in Yemen. In Yemen, there are two problems, big problems. First, in the north, former Yemen Arab Republic, the main problem there is the power. People there, tribes, political groups, they are only fighting how to grab or to hold the power there in the north. Anyone who comes to the power never ever goes away, only with the same power, and it will be forced to be killed or to be exiled. That's all. The history says that during the 60s, 1962 war started between, actually that was a proxy war between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. And in 1967, when they came to an end, or to find an end for the war there in Khartoum by the Arab League, they have agreed that the royalists and the Republican should combine or should compose a government there, government 50-50. But the problem is still there because the deep state there in Sana'a is still ruling Yemen and also occupying the southern part of Yemen at that time, Yemen Arab Republic, the Shia, or the called Zaydi in the north, and in the south, the third Shafi'i, the Sunni. So this conflict started when Al-Hadi came from Medina Munawwara in Saudi Arabia now, 2,300 years ago. And they were ruling, and still now ruling, in different types and forms there in Yemen. So, the conflict is very far away into the history, and the deep state is still creating, or the Zaydi state creating itself according to the differences or the changes of the politics in the world. So the war for them is a source for developing and creating their system there in order to find out ways how they can survive. This is the main problem in the Sana'a and also in North Yemen. In the south, it is completely different. South was ruled, was in the British colony for more than 129 years. And then they have inherited Western traditions according to what we find it out now in the political or even social and economic milieu in the south, completely different than the north. When they went to the unification, they went with other mentality because Saudi Arabia has lost its identity, has lost even its name, changed to Yemen, was never ever the Saudi Arabia was one system with Yemen. Yemen was completely different. Yemen as political order has been placed only 1917 when Imam Hamid al-Din has changed that from a Mamlaka or the kingdom of kingdom Yemeni to Yemeni kingdom in 1917. Since that time, he has been trying in order to draw out or to push Britain out from the south, that the south is the Yemeni part, the part of Yemen. So when there came the nationalist and National Liberation Front 1967, at that time, Aden was the second world harbor which was famous to everyone. And when the Britain left Aden, we were collapsed. So they could not find an option or solution for the South, so they failed in the South in the 22nd of May 1990. They went with the South to the tribe state there in Sana'a. Since there, that was agreed, that was a war in 1994. On the 7th July 1994, Yemen has invaded the South and occupied the South. So the problem started from that point. Now when they came to the solution, to find our solution, they did ignore the South. Never ever it was mentioned, even in the initiative or the proposals of the Gulf states led by that later on escalation by Saudi Arabia. They have ignored everything. Even the national dialogue in Sana'a that time has ignored also the issue of the South. Southern peoples on 7th of July 2007, they came out in 24 demonstrations in Median Wide. They are seeking the peace, asking to restore their state, which they was collapsed on the 22nd of 1990. Till now, there was no even all the resolutions released by the Security Council, UN Security Council. They haven't never spoken or discussed this matter. So even now, they are trying to find out in the resolution 2216, and then the last two, which was also raised by the British government to the UN Security Council, 2451, 2452, just only to draw the forces from Al-Hudaydah and Ta'ad. Until now, still there on the papers. Nothing has been done until now. Martin Griffiths, what he has offered to now, he has been trying to push them together at least to find a way, to find a pathway to the peace later on, to find a political solution by first getting a solution for the military crisis there. So now I mean myself, if we want to find out solution for the whole problems, we have to find a political solution before we go to the military or the humanitarian crisis. So we cannot fly with one wing. We have to find two wings. So the problem of the South should be resolved. We have to find a resolution, and I think the only resolution, according to what I have watched and noticed and followed the whole history now from 1967 till now, since so-called independence, peoples are now seeking for the peace, seeking to restore their state. So the main solution that should be and must be, I think, that the international community and the regional community have to find out the only solution to restore the two states and to find out ways how we can restore the political environment that was damaged in 22nd of 1990, so that we can end the suffering of the peoples in the north and at the same time suffering of the peoples in the south. Otherwise, the peoples in the south, if they find themselves again that dragged into Yemen, they will find ways, and it will be very dangerous. It will endanger not only the national security in the world states, not also the peace process in Yemen, but also the international security. So that you have to be very careful, not Yemen and the south will be turned into new Somalia or Afghanistan. So the people are now prepared emotionally and prepared also totally that they are, maybe if they don't secure their rights and to find the hands of the international community be given to them any support in order first to restore the two states, north and the south, and to get also compensation, at least then to rebuild the country and to find a start for the whole problem. Because if we rebuild only the harbor of Aden, I think that it will be enough not only to feed the people and to secure their life there in the south, but also for the whole Arabic Peninsula. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Severely abused from lack of food, no education, no way to live, displacement, and this is in violation of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights on many points. And our organisation does is we believe that education is key, and so we educate people in their 30 rights with this little booklet called What Are Human Rights? It's available to all organisations around the world, in the UK, and for community groups. And the key thing about human rights education is that knowing your human rights is not just to know them, but it actually empowers a person when they actually know what their rights are. And these rights are yours by birth, these 30 rights. And what it does on the other side of the coin is it actually civilises the bully of a person who's perpetrating human rights abuses. And so through this education on a grassroots level, we come to change the mindset and the way people think about how they treat others, what they consider is correct and incorrect. And so, whilst the issue is very large, and we've heard many solutions from speakers today, my contribution would be is human rights education in any form that it can absolutely help the people of Yemen, or any of the people that are living in the UK who are lobbying to help those people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ahmed, you want to say something, and then we will have a group photo, and then we'll carry on talking. Yeah.
Thank you, Mushtaq, for your wonderful chairmanship of this event, and thanks to the speakers. Very interesting points you've raised. I was also very interested in some of the speakers' reference to collaboration. What we're trying to do is bring unity and diversity between different communities on a bilateral and multilateral basis. We were very focused on collaboration and working together because divergent thinking, exposure to diversity increases innovation, creativity, which is essential for executive control, executive decisions. It's important for business, corporations, and also at a grassroots level. So we're promoting diversity because it's key to create a fair and prosperous society. One of the main things we want to do is work together as a community, and one of the key factors in diversity is it helps us all think in new ways and also create new ideas. And I think really, if for example, at the moment what's going on in society, if we can use outside the system, like one of the speakers earlier mentioned, if we could think outside the box and not be sort of focused and be psychologically focused on what's part of the system. If we can be outside the box, then we'll be thinking about new and creative solutions to society. So thank you very much for letting me speak. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mushtaq. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to be here to talk about, to listen to people talking about Yemen. Tomorrow we have Foreign and Commonwealth Office questions, and I was lucky to be drawn to ask a question of, the Minister to me, I should think, who will reply, about what's happening in Yemen and what the government is doing, what the British government is doing to find positive ways forward. And one of the things that really struck me from the speakers I did hear is this focus on people. You know, there are people suffering here, and it's really important that we find a way forward, working with other people to try and find the best resolution that we can for those people as quickly as possible. Because it's those people who have so little agency themselves who are really feeling the brunt of what's going on between different countries. So thank you very much for coming along today. Can you go into my contribution?
Yes, I think if there are any people who want to ask a question or very briefly comment, you are most welcome. Anybody? Thank you very much. Our next meeting is basically, we are honoring Tony Benn on 13th of March. It will be his 5th death anniversary, and we know that he was somebody who always stood for human rights. And I know a lot of my colleagues and members are here. I will be very happy if you can join us. Obviously, we don't have any funds or anything to do a lot of work, but we do try our best. Our next meeting on Middle East will be on 4th of June, which is especially on Gaza. And you know Gaza is another isolated place, and I think it all relates to the Middle East crisis. It's Palestine, and I'm very pleased that a Palestinian sheikh is sitting next to me, who has worked all his life for human rights and betterment of Palestinians. So if there is no question, we would love to have a photograph. Yes, Clive.
There's been quite a lot of emphasis on arms sales and the British government's attitude to arms sales, which strikes me as somewhat schizophrenic, because it's been demonstrably proven that the UK Special Forces were operative in Syria. The Saudi Air Force is incapable of doing what it's doing without the support of British and American military personnel and mercenaries, I presume. So we are actually, we're talking here as if the British government has some vested interest in peace. It doesn't. It's actually deploying forces into the region subversively. And so to talk about arms sales, which in any event are hardly in the control of the British government, because if they don't go directly to Saudi Arabia, they'll go via a proxy. I just find it quite startling that this is not mentioned.
No, I think it was mentioned, and
the institutions especially kind of stop the killing and whatever has happened in the past, to actually stop that in the future. And that's not happened. All those institutions which were actually created to stop that, they've been hijacked. They have just become toothless and powerless institutions. And every time we find ourselves in these rooms, on the streets, in a reaction to something which happens, all this new technology and the talk of globalization and then bringing the societies and the cultures together and evolving as a human race, we hear about that, but all that technology somehow is again being used to sort of capitalize on all the fault lines and all the differences as a human race we've had and will always have. And rather than cherishing and enjoying those differences and appreciating it, we just carry on using them to give more power and strength to these forces who have been actually sort of forcing these wars upon us as human race. And that's pure hunger for power, greed for money, and that's what it's led by. And it's nothing to do with the fault lines and the things we talk about on ground. They are just mere excuses. People just want to live in harmony. They want to love each other, live peacefully, and have a piece of bread on their tables. So we can talk about education, we can talk about everything else, and unfortunately most of these wars are actually funded and thought of by the civilized world, where education is actually available to everybody else. So although the people who are fighting are probably not educated, but the wars are actually enforced by people who actually have all the knowledge in the world, who have got all the exposure in the world, and who understand all these differences and understand those differences actually don't exist. They are just there to be exploited. And I think we need to be more proactive about it, and we actually need to raise a voice about it.
Karen, tell us what can we do? Just give me one sentence. Apart from sitting here, lobbying the government, speaking to the ministers, asking them you are wrong, and you should stop it. Tell me, as a people living in United Kingdom, and I hope everybody who is sitting here is a citizen of United Kingdom, and we have local MPs. We do right. I was there at Brisla event where Ambassador of UK to Sri Lanka was there, and Sri Lankan Ambassador to UK was there. After a few weeks, they are organizing a meeting on Commonwealth. Tell me, what else do you think we should do?
And I think if the public were more aware of the outrage, there would be a lot more pressure on the governments. Now, as mentioned before, there are very heavy interests, the British government dragging its feet through the entire process of people challenging what should be a very clear case of stop selling weapons to a country which you illegally are able to sell weapons to. But nonetheless, I do believe that just creating that public pressure, so Khashoggi showed a very strong example, so I campaigned on the UAE. And after Khashoggi's murder, even though the UAE is not Saudi Arabia, people on the streets reacted differently. Politicians have been a lot more on their feet, and they are a lot more willing to answer questions or move on because there is this pressure on them. And how do we create this pressure? I don't know. We are always trying and working on it, but public awareness and creating that public outrage is going to be key, I think.
No, thank you very much. But I'll tell you an example. Kefale is standing there. The first meeting on Ethiopia was held under all-party parliamentary group, Third World Solidarity, on 9th of June 1914. And since then, we have seen a Prime Minister resigning, a new Prime Minister coming and releasing all the political prisoners. A Minister of British government was sacked because he raised the question of human rights with the Ethiopian Saundra and myself in Ethiopia. So you can stand here and talk to us. We will tell you what we have achieved and what we want. This is the first meeting on Yemen. I have already suggested we will have a round table, and we will carry on working on not only on Yemen but all other areas of conflict in Afghanistan, in Palestine, and as I mentioned, on the next meeting is on Gaza. Why? Because Gaza has been isolated.